Hey there, and welcome to The Well. My name is Tony, and I am the site pastor of our Bolton congregation, and I'm so glad that I get to be the one today to welcome you to our online service. You know, today we're going to be talking about a topic that when you hear it, you might kind of roll your eyes a little bit. You might kind of think, oh, this is sort of cliche for church. Some of you might even be tempted to kind of click on another link for another video or check out another YouTube channel altogether. Today, we are going to be talking about the rules. Some of you, even when you hear me say that, you might even be, like I said, you might be rolling your eyes and kind of thinking, you know what? This is kind of the reason that I stopped going to church many years ago or whatever in the first place. Because church and religious stuff was always about rules. Do this and don't do this, and this is what you have to do or be to be a good person or whatever. But I want to encourage you to stick around for at least a couple reasons. First, because the truth is, whether we like it or not, whether we realize it or not, there are all kinds of rules and expectations and standards that are kind of, many of which are often unspoken, that kind of govern all kinds of things that we do, whether in our school life or our work life or our relationships, all over the place. We've got things that we're allowed to do and not allowed to do at school, right? We've got expectations from people that are closest to us, whether it's our spouses or our kids or our parents or our family members, things that they want us to do and to be. And we've certainly got standards that we've got to abide by, whether on our job sites or in our offices or our workplace, whatever that might be. All of us have sort of rules and expectations and standards that are kind of over every part of our lives and every one of our relationships. But even more importantly, I want you to stick around because I believe that Jesus had some pretty incredible things, even revolutionary things, to say about the rules. And not just church rules or religious rules. He kind of had revolutionary things to say about all of the standards and expectations and rules that govern every single part of our lives. And if we can take to heart the things that Jesus said about the rules, I believe that this has the power to actually change the way that we work, change the way that we learn in our school settings, change the way that we relate to people in every single one of our relationships. I think that if we can take Jesus' teachings to heart on this, it has the power to change a lot, maybe even change everything. So, friends, if this is your first time joining us at church and you're just kind of checking things out, man, I'm so glad you're here. I want to welcome you today. If this is part of your regular kind of weekly pattern or rhythm on Sunday morning or some other time, and you're here maybe with one or two or a few others in your family to sing and to worship and to learn together, wherever you may be at, wherever you might be at in your spiritual journey, whenever you might be at, I'm so glad you're here. I want to invite you to lean in and to listen and even take to heart Jesus' revolutionary words about the rules. We're going to be celebrating communion in this morning's service or in today's service. And so if you've got some bread and some juice nearby or on hand, or if you don't, whatever you got, that's sort of the closest things to that. I want you to invite you to take a second and go grab that so you can take part later in the service as we celebrate that a little later. But with that said, let's dig into the rest of the service.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I so good. With every breath that I am made, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God.
Hey, welcome to Church at the Well. I thought today we could play a little game called What Should You Do? I'm going to give you a few scenarios. You just think through and say, oh, what should I do? What should somebody do in this situation? You have a side hustle business and it just blew up this year in the best of ways. And you made thousands of dollars more than you thought you would, and in cash that people paid you. And now it's tax season and you're thinking, man, if I declare this income, I'm going to have to give a chunk of it back to the government who hasn't done anything for me. Or you just think, I really needed it this year. Like, I can't part with this. And all this is already accounted for. What should you do? Or how about this? Your brother's chore on Saturdays is to mow the lawn. And he was supposed to do it Saturday morning, but Saturday afternoon rolls around and he hasn't done it yet. He procrastinated and he's about to go do it. And one of his friends comes by on the bike and says, hey, let's go biking. Let's go to the park. And he turns to you and says, oh, I really want to go. Can you mow the lawn for me? What should you do? What should you do? It's 3 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. You are up north at a friend's cottage. The sun is out. It's one of those glorious Canadian summer afternoons. You got a cold drink in your hand. You're dangling your feet in the water and life is good. And then you remember there's a prayer meeting that you were planning on going to in the city at 7 o'clock. But if you're going to get there on time, you got to start packing up now. What should you do? What should you do? It's Valentine's Day. And you had plans to go out for dinner with your fiance. You're getting married soon. This is a special Valentine's Day. You're anticipating your wedding. And at 4 o'clock, you get a call from one of your vendors saying, hey, I got courtside seats for the Raptors game tonight. What should you do? What should you do? You go on vacation in a new city and you land there in the plane. It's kind of evening and darkness is settling in. You get to your rental car and you're on your way to a hotel and the directions take you down kind of a pretty lonely, deserted street. And on the side of the road as you're driving, you see someone who's pulled over, a little bit of smoke coming out of their car, and they're waving you down because they need help. What should you do? What should you do? You're in a Google Classroom, like online class, with your class, your teacher's teaching. And while your teacher's teaching, you get a text from one of your friends on the side, say, hey, join this game. They want you to play a video game with them on the phone. And you already know what the teacher's saying. You got it. You're doing really well in this class. What should you do? What should you do? You're being asked to reduce the size of your team at work. It's been a tough year, and so there needs to be some cutbacks. Now, the easiest person to let go on your team would be the person who has not been performing well. This person doesn't seem to gel well with the rest of the team. And so if you let them go, nobody would bat an eye. Your boss and your team would support that decision. And yet you know this person really needs the paycheck. And you know things at home for them have not been good this year. What should you do? Now, there's so many different ways we could answer those questions and the many other decisions we have to make in life, but let me oversimplify it for us for a moment and say we probably come at this from a few different ways. Some of us are rule followers. Oh, you got to do what's right. That's what the rules are there for. So you don't have to think about it. You just follow it. Here's what's right. Here's what you need to do. Here's what the rule says. Here's what the law says. And there's some of us who are the rule benders. Yes, the rules are good, but they're there. You need to adapt them. Every situation is different. The rules need to, fit the context that you're in. There's the rule benders. Now then there's some of us who are the rule breakers, which is basically saying, I don't need the rules. I know what I'm doing. Like, trust me, I'm fine. I know what I'm doing. The rule breakers. And then there are the rule feelers, which is, I'm just going to go with my gut. You know, I just feel I got a gut on this one. I know this is what the rule says, but I'm going to trust my gut. Now, even as I'm describing those scenarios, some of you are making faces at the different types of people, but we're all probably in some fit into one of those categories. Now, take the Valentine's Day Raptors courtside tickets scenario. If you're a rule follower, you're like, sorry, I got plans tonight with my fiance. Can't take the tickets. Thanks, but no thanks. That's the rule followers. Hey, that's what's right. That's what you should do. You know what? You already had plans. That was made before. This comes after. Now, the rule benders might say, oh, wow, what a great opportunity. And it's Valentine's Day. There's a win-win here, right? We could all get what we want. And so I'm going to just craft the situation to what I need it to be. There's the rule breakers who are like, great, I'll take the tickets. Honey, we got to move our Valentine's Day dinner to tomorrow night. That's the rule breakers. Hey, don't worry, rules can be broken. And then there's the rule feelers, which is like, oh man, I just feel like this is right. I mean, I got a phone call at 4 p.m. on Valentine's Day for courtside seats. This just feels right. Now, that was an actual scenario of my life a month before Jen and I got married. It's Valentine's Day. I get a call from one of my suppliers saying, VJ, I got amazing seats for the Raptor game. Now, I am, truth be told, a rule bender. So I thought, this is a win-win. I called Jen, and at that time, she says, yeah, sure, let's go. Now, years later, she told me that was a bad move. I did not want to go to the Raptors game. So, you know, she was not comfortable enough with me at that point to tell me the truth. Now she is. But we have both grown tremendously in these years, because I'll say, I know I would not do that anymore. I would not do that. And she says, I would totally go to the Raptors game. You shouldn't turn down this ticket. So we've both grown tremendously in that. But listen, these aren't just kind of the little decisions about tickets or mowing the lawn. All of the decisions we have to face in life, many really important, many weighing on us, many implications to the thousands of decisions we need to make, and the rules and the laws that are in place in our land and in our workplace, in our school and in our family and our home, and how it all works are all part of that. And here's the thing. There is so much conflict that is created by the different ways that we look at the choices and the decisions we make. Between the rule followers and the rule benders and the rule breakers and the rule feelers, our differences in this make a significant amount of conflict in our marriages, in our homes, in our communities, in our countries, in our schools, and in our workplaces. Even the world we're living right now is constantly, the laws and the rules are changing, and we are having a lot of conflict over these things, in part, not just because of our personalities and the way we might lean towards rule breakers, rule benders, and whatever, but because every decision in some way or another, directly or indirectly, involves people. Right? All of our decisions affect ourselves, the people close to us, the people we go to school with, the people who lead us, the people we work with, the people we're connected to in our families, in our marriages. And so there's so much riding on this question of how we make decisions and how we regard the rules and the laws and how that affects the people in our lives and ourselves included. Well, we're in this series called Revolutionary. Jesus, the revolutionary, bringing an entirely new way to see ourselves and the world, in a sense, in his life and in his death and his resurrection and his teaching, not only 2,000 years ago, but still now turning the world upside down in the most beautiful way. And one of the titles that Jesus' followers had for him was rabbi, which meant teacher. Jesus, as a rabbi, was constantly teaching them how to relate to God, how to relate to themselves, how to relate to the world around them, and what did God require of them, what were God's laws, what were the rules of the land around them, and how they were meant to live and respond in those things. And Jesus' world was one that was just like ours, very conflicted over the rules, over the laws. And I want you to listen to this passage as Jesus, a lot of his teaching actually addressed the rules of the laws. How do we relate? And in this passage we're going to listen to today and we're going to camp out in today, Jesus, not only 2,000 years ago, but today gives us such a fresh way to all of the rule followers and the rule benders and the rule breakers and the rule feelers, both then and now, an entirely different way to make decisions. And so I want you to read listen as this passage is read for us today.
At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath." He answered, "Haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. Or haven't you read in the law that the priests on Sabbath duty in the temple desecrate the Sabbath, and yet are innocent? I tell you that something greater than the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, 'I desire mercy, not sacrifice,' you would not have condemned the innocent, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Going on from that place, he went into their synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Looking for a reason to bring charges against Jesus, they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus.
This is such a fascinating conversation that Jesus has with the religious leaders of his day. And just a bit of context so we can understand what he's saying and why it matters so much to us, because a lot of the words and things may seem a bit distant from our reality, but they are so relevant to us. Jesus is having this conversation with the religious leaders about the Sabbath. That his disciples were doing something, breaking heads of grain, or probably the better translation was like ears of corn. They were picking corn and like husking it and eating it. And the religious leaders say, "Hey, that's not allowed. It's the Sabbath day." Now, the Sabbath was one of the 10 commandments, was one day in 7. But one of the 10 commandments, the 10 laws that God gave his people was, on the seventh day, on the Sabbath day, you shall do no work. It is a holy day. The idea of the Sabbath law was God had rescued the children of Israel from being slaves. And then as they had come out of a place in a life where they had worked 24/7, he said, "No, now with me, you're going to do things differently. I want you to stop 1 in every 7 and not work." And he said it was a holy day. That the 10 Commandments say the Sabbath is a holy day, which just means it's a day not like any other day. And so on that day, they were not supposed to work. Now, here's what you need to know about the Jewish tradition and the laws around Sabbath. Of course, there's all kinds of questions. Well, what is work? Am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? Am I allowed to sweep the floor? Am I allowed to make food? Am I allowed to clean my yard? Am I allowed to like pull a weed that's standing in my way or something like that? I'm allowed to vacuum because my mom says I have to vacuum. And so the Jewish tradition, the law, had 39 other laws that were like a fence, they called it actually, around this one law, the Sabbath. So to make sure we don't break that, because that's really important, that's one of the 10 commandments. We cannot break God's laws. Let's put these other laws that are fences around to make sure that you don't do those things so you don't break the one of the 10 commandments. But in addition to those 39 laws, they had what came to be known as the Mishnah or the Mishnah Tradition, which was the oral tradition of the teachers. Most people didn't read or write then. So the laws and the how do you live and what are we supposed to do was passed on through verbal communication. And part of the Mishnah Tradition had even more laws around the Sabbath. And so this was a very heavily guarded, heavily regulated thing. And his disciples, Jesus' disciples, were doing something that was breaking the Sabbath. Now, this wasn't just, oh, here's some guys doing something they shouldn't do. Jesus was growing in popularity and influence as a rabbi, a religious teacher. The rabbis were the ones who were meant to interpret the law for the people. And now the religious leaders around him who are saying, well, we don't know where you're coming from, who gives you the authority to do this? And now you, who's growing in influence and popularity, and people are looking at you as to how to relate to God and how to relate to all of our laws, and you are letting your followers, your disciples, break the Sabbath. That is not okay. And so they bring this issue up with Jesus and saying, what How can you do this? And Jesus gives a response that is brilliant. It's not only addressing their issues and their questions over why it's okay for his disciples to do what they're doing, but it actually opens the door for us, for all of us rule followers, rule benders, rule breakers, rule feelers, to have an entirely new way to think about any rule and any law and how we relate to God and ourselves and others. The first way Jesus addresses this, he gives them 4 reasons. And if we're not understanding what's going on, we'll just think, oh, he's just making an argument back to them. But Jesus was actually explaining to them, hey, here's how I relate to this law and every law. And he says 4 things. First, he says in response, he says, well, haven't you heard about David, King David, who when he was on the run from Saul went into the temple and the priests gave him, or the tabernacle, and the priests gave him the bread that was only for the priests to eat? Now, you don't need to know all of the tradition of Israel's history, except to know that David was their most cherished political leader. The kingdom of Israel was at its zenith under his care, and so he was revered. And they thought the future king is going to come from the line of David. David goes into this tabernacle at this time when he was on the run from the king who was king, but who was going to leave. David had already been anointed king. The priests gave him the bread because they knew, hey, you're going to be the king. And Jesus, in a sense, is comparing himself to Israel's greatest leader and said, oh yeah, remember that other guy who was your greatest king, who was going to be king? I'm like him. He was comparing himself to David by saying, hey, David did that. I can do it too. I am just like Israel's greatest political leader. And then he goes on and he says, and also, don't the priests who work in the temple on the Sabbath violate the Sabbath because they're working, but it's okay because they're priests? That was not just a clever argument. He's saying, I'm not only like David. I'm not comparing myself only to David, your greatest political leader. I'm comparing myself to one of the priests. I'm a religious leader too. I have religious authority, not just political authority to do this. David and the priest. Then he says, by the way, something greater than the temple is here. Now, in their mind, there was nothing greater than the temple. The temple was the last visible symbol of it was not just a religious symbol, it was a political symbol. In a time and in a place in the city that was ruled by the Roman Empire, the temple stood as this constant reminder saying, no, we are the people of God. We have religious and political independence, and ultimately God is going to set us free. And as long as the temple stands, we have hope. The temple was also, in a sense, the place where all of the law came from. It was where the most accomplished religious leaders and teachers of the law lived and did their ministry. You couldn't build temples anywhere else in Israel. You had to go to the temple once a year. And so it was the center place of the most holy place, in a sense. And that's why you'll read in Jesus' biographies, his criticism of the temple a lot was what got him in such trouble. And here he's saying, you know what? Something, not someone, it's interesting. Other times he says someone greater than the temple. This time he says something greater than the temple. In other words, my way, my kingdom, my interpretation of the laws is greater than your temple. To which all of these things he's saying would have been mounting their frustration with him. Which at the end of it then he says, and by the way, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. I am the Lord of this laws. I don't obey those laws. The laws obey me, which is his way of saying, I'm not a rule breaker or a rule bender or a rule follower or a rule feeler. I am the rule maker. I am Lord over this, which actually helps us make sense of what otherwise is a very strange response to them. You know what they say in the end? It says, they decided they needed to kill him. Why? Because he broke the Sabbath? Because his disciples, pulled some corn and ate it on the Sabbath? No. Because of what his response was. He says, you know why it's okay for them to do this? Leave them alone. You know why? Because I am just like David. I am just like a priest. I'm greater than the temple, and I am Lord over this law, which was crazy for him to say. It was like he was saying, the Sabbath is my law. I'm Lord over it. You know who said the Sabbath was mine? God's. If you look back in the Old Testament scriptures, one of the times God says, this is my Sabbath. Don't break my Sabbath, my law. And Jesus in this moment is saying, yeah, it's my Sabbath too. Making himself not only equal or greater than David, not only equal or greater than the priests, not only greater than the temple, but equal with God. Which got him killed. But it is the starting point for us to say, no, we are not ultimately under the authority of law. We are under the authority of Jesus. And we take our cues from what Jesus says. Which is interesting then, because it's like, wait, well, what does Jesus say about the law? It seems here like he's saying, hey, you can't tell my disciples what to do. They are accountable to me, and I say it's okay for them to do that. Which makes us think, oh, Jesus must be like kind of a rule breaker or a rule bender or a rule, he just doesn't care about that stuff. Isn't that, and that we talked about that last week. Isn't that what Jesus is like? He's like, yeah, go ahead, do whatever you need to. I got your back. But Jesus isn't saying that. First of all, he says, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. I have the right to explain this law and to tell you and everyone what to do. But then he goes on to give them a new way of seeing all laws, including the Sabbath. Ultimately, he gives them a new question to ask. And the question isn't, what should you do? The question is, what does love require of you? Not what should you do in this situation, in that situation. What should you do with this law or that law? What does love require of you? And I'll explain in a moment where we get this from. But this was the question Jesus was asking over and over and over again. Why? Because the truth is, all of God's laws, all of the laws were always about love. If you go back in Israel's history, even when the 10 Commandments appeared, you may not know this, even if you've never been in church before, whatever, you may have this idea of God as kind of the religious stickler, giving us the laws and saying, this is what you need to do. And many of us maybe have thrown off religion, right, for that reason. We're like, that's why I left, man. That's why I left the church. It was all about the rules. But even the 10 Commandments we look at, this isn't Jesus rescuing us from God, the heavy rule stickler. The laws that God gave his people were actually not terms of a contract. They were vows in a love relationship, almost like vows in a marriage ceremony. If you go back in Israel's history, God had rescued them from Egypt, rescued them from 400 years of systemic slavery, where they were used up by, in a sense, a God king who said, you exist for my pleasure, for my needs. I'm going to use you to get what I want. That was their generational situation for 400 years. And that's what the gods of Egypt did to them. And so God bringing them out of slavery is saying, no, I'm not a God who enslaves you. I rescue you. And he brings them out into the desert and he says, okay, I have already shown you that I love you, that I'm for you, that you belong to me and I belong to you. And then he gives them the 10 Commandments as their vows of love. It was a love ceremony, saying God saying, I have pledged my love to you. And so keep these laws. And listen, the laws that Israel were given were both for them to be able to receive love, also for them to be able to show love back to God, also for them to be able to love themselves and love other people. That's what the laws were for. And so Jesus, thousands of years later, when the religious leaders are saying, hey, you broke the law, he says, you know what the most important question is not what should you do, but what does love require of you? And you guys have taken these laws, and understandably, they hung on to them. They were trying to do good. They thought, hey, revolution's going to come if we live properly and abide by all the rules, then God will be pleased with us and he will rescue us. And Jesus says, no, you have allowed these laws to become he said, even a burden. He said, you know what? Only so few of you can actually keep them. And the greater problem is it has actually kept you from seeing what the point of these things were in the first place. They were always about love. And here's how we know this. Because in two ways, he said, I am Lord of the Sabbath. It's okay for these disciples to eat grain. Why? Because the Sabbath is a gift. Elsewhere, he said, human beings weren't made to serve the Sabbath. The Sabbath was a gift to them. The Sabbath was given to humans. In other words, God says, the reason I want you to stop working, to not work, is so that you can rest. Is so that you can receive. You're not slaves, right? When they were slaves, there was no day of rest. The Sabbath was a gift to say you don't need to, you're not defined by what you do. You can have a day where you don't do what you're supposed to do every day and you're still you. And you can rest and receive my love. And it's a way of making you trust me to say, you know what, my ultimate hope and trust for people who were farmers and who raised cattle and worked the land, if you didn't work, you didn't eat. He's saying, no, ultimately your faith and trust in where your food and shelter and clothing is going to come from is not your work, it's from me. The Sabbath was a gift for them to receive the love of God. And so he says, yes, of course my disciples can eat grain if they need it. The Sabbath is a gift. You've missed the whole point. This is about love. But then he says, this isn't just about you receiving the love of God. he goes on and says, I need you to learn something. What does this mean? And he quotes scripture and he says, from God, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. This idea of sacrifice, a lot of their laws were around, okay, these are the sacrifices you have to make. And Jesus says, you know what's more important than sacrifice, than law? Is love, mercy, compassion, and love. And so what happens? He goes on into the temple. The next scene, it says there was a man there with a shriveled arm, with an arm that had a palsy or something and didn't work. And again, the Pharisees are like, hey, is it right to heal on the Sabbath? That's work. And Jesus says, come on. If a sheep fell into a pit, one of your sheep fell into a pit on the Sabbath, wouldn't you pull it out? The rhetorical answer is yes, of course. Why? Because it's worth money to them. That was how they made their money. It was a part of their property. It's not because you loved, Lammy the lamb. It fell in a pit. It's your money. He says, how much more important or valuable are people than your stuff, than your things? He was pointing out to them, here's this man who's got a shriveled arm, and you don't even care about the fact that he's poor because of it, that his life has been so dramatically affected by it. By this has affected him so. All you're using him is as an object lesson to try to trap me. You don't care about people. Your laws have gotten in the way of love. And that's why he says to the man, stretch out your hand. And Jesus heals him. He says, don't you understand? I desire mercy, love, compassion. That's what any law, if it's good, is for, is to lead you into love. To which we go, yeah, love is so much better than law, right? Love is so much better than law. And it's true. But here's the thing. Love is both freeing and binding at the same time. Love is both freeing and binding at the same time. Is love freeing? Oh, yes, it is, right? And we go, oh, that's so much better than laws. You should do this, you should do that. Love, receive the love of God. Receive the love of God for yourself. Love God in return. That's so freeing. But love is binding too, isn't it? How do we know this? We'll just look at any healthy marriage relationship. Any of you that know people are married, or you are married, or you've been married, you know in its purest, most beautiful form, love in a marriage is both freeing and binding at the same time. Is it freeing? Of course it is. Is it freeing to know that someone loves you just the way you are? Is it free to know that someone has committed their life to love you and to make you better and to serve you and to care for you no matter what? Is it freeing to know that even though they see you, warts and all, they're not going to leave you? They love you. They accept you as you are. Yes, that's so freeing. But is it binding? Yeah, for sure it is. Does it mean you have to restrict your freedom? For sure it does. If I say, okay, wait a second, let me just get this straight, like on my wedding day, okay? Wait, so you're going to love me in sickness and in health, no matter what. You're going to try to serve me and help me on my highs and lows, yeah. Oh, you're gonna love me, warts and all, even though you're gonna know the most about me. And I'm probably gonna hurt you more than I'm gonna hurt everyone else because I'm closest to you, but you're still gonna love me and forgive me. Yeah, and you're gonna be faithfully committed to me no matter what? Great. So I can do whatever I want? At that point, the minister's probably saying, wait, I think you're missing the whole point of this love thing, right? That's the wrong question. Oh, you mean I can be free to do whatever I want? No, if you ask that, you've missed what love is. You've missed the binding part of love. Yes, the freedom of being loved exactly as you are, but what does that love do? It binds you to the other person in a similar love commitment. Friends, and this is what Jesus is saying. He's saying if you just live by the laws as a rule follower or rule bender or rule breaker, rule feeler, you will live your life ultimately becoming a very selfish and a very hardened person, because this is what the rule says, and I always want to do with the rules, and that's how I am, and that's how it's about, or the rule benders, well, yeah, we'll just try to work the situation, but that's what that's who I am. I'm a righteous, upstanding person, and I always do what's right. Or if you're a rule breaker, a rule feeler, you'll basically say, well, you know what, these things don't apply to me, and it'll make you a very selfish person, and Jesus says, no, I'm inviting you into a whole new way of making decisions, a revolutionary way of seeing the world. Don't just ask, oh, what should I do? Ask, what does love require of you? Friends, that revolutionizes the way we see all of our decisions. It is a game-changing way For any of us, whether you are a rule follower or a rule bender or a rule breaker or a rule feeler, what does love require of me is a far more beautiful, a far more freeing, and a far more binding question, right? Let's go back to our little game. You know, what should you do? You're on a Google Classroom, your teacher's teaching, and your friends are saying, hey, let's play a game. And if you're like a rule bender or a rule follower or whatever, you're like, no, yeah, this is what I should do. Or guys, I can't believe you're asking me to do that. That's wrong. You know, you could be like that as a rule follower. Or you could be like, well, yeah, I know, I kind of know enough, or I don't care. That's if you're following the rules. What is Jesus' question? What does love require of you? Say, what does it mean to love my teacher? What does it mean to love my friends and want what's best for them and to honor my teacher, to honor the people who are in authority over me, to love them and respect them? That changes the way I view the question. When you think about the pain involved in declaring all of your income, knowing you're going to have to give some of it away, and you can argue whether you think the government's doing a good job or not with the taxes that you give. But what does it mean to love those in authority over you? To love the people that public education and public health care will actually help? How can it change how you think about it if you say, what does it mean to love? Asking, what does love require, is both freeing, saying, oh, okay, I don't have to live under the compulsion of these things that I find are so restrictive or can make me very judgmental or very selfish. But it's binding. It actually raises the standard far above law to what does love require. You know, I think one of the missing pieces in all of our discussions, I find, as Jesus followers about the pandemic, you know, we can expect and assume that the rest of the world is going to be angry or frustrated and debating, and there's rule followers and rule benders and rule breakers and rule feelers about all this stuff. It's like, no, this is what the law says, this is what I have to do. And it's like, well, we can kind of adapt to our situation, and like, I don't care what the government's saying, whatever. What I don't hear enough from all of us as Jesus followers, myself included, is saying, what does it mean to love well in this season? Friends, the law, we can say, oh, applies to everyone, but the law of love is a higher law that applies to all of us as Christians. Ultimately, that is what we are held accountable to. What does it mean to love? That is a game-changing question in every decision you'll have to make. And so what does that mean for us today? Just as you kind of think about your own life, the first question I want to ask you is, where do you lean? Where do you lean? Are you a rule follower or a rule bender or a rule breaker or a rule feeler? Are you someone who's like, nope, we always do what's right, this is what we do, and that's, you know? Or are you, we can kind of adapt the situation. Yeah, but every law has to be nuanced, and let's talk about the spirit versus the letter. Or it's saying, well, I don't care, I've got it under control. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Or like, I just got this in my gut, right? We're all different, and there's good and bad things about all of it. But where do you lean? Just ask yourself that question. Maybe even how you've responded to the pandemic and the pandemic restrictions will give you an indication of where do you lean. And based on that question, where do you lean? Where might you be leaking love? Right? In your relationship with God. Right? Even that scenario of, leaving the cottage to go to a prayer meeting. If you're like, I should go. Yeah, no, I shouldn't like the sunshine and the outdoors more than, that's not the point. The point is, God invites you into, I might actually be able to grasp the love of God at that prayer meeting. I don't want to miss a chance to receive God's gifts to me. Or I want to show up in that place even though I don't like being online for my home group. I don't like being online for youth group. And yeah, we don't love being online compared to being in person. But what does love require of me to say, hey, maybe me showing up actually shows love to the other people who are coming, or shows love to my leader, or shows love to my home group leader, say, hey, I'm with you guys. I'm in this. I don't love this. I've been online all day, but I love you guys. What does love require? And so, where has love been leaking? Maybe in my relationship with God, where it's kind of more of a rule, regimented, routine-oriented relationship I have with him as opposed to love. Or maybe with other people where I haven't been actually thinking about the decisions I'm making in light of what does it mean to love them well. So where do you lean? Where might you be leaking love? Say, okay, well then what does love require of me in this decision or in this relationship? As we continue to think about that and contemplate, in a few moments we're going to take communion together. We're going to have a chance to break bread and receive the cup as symbols of Jesus' answer to the question, what does love require of him? Jesus' answer to that question was, no greater love than this, than for one to lay down his life for his friends. That was Jesus' answer. What does love require of me? My life. And friends, that is the one who is inviting us to follow him. It is the one who has first answered that question definitively by laying down his life. It is about receiving his love and also receiving his way of loving others. And so I want you to just reflect on this song that the band's going to lead us in as you prepare your own heart and your life to receive communion. And if you need to take a moment even during the song as you listen, just to confess and say, God, yeah, love has leaked out of my relationship with you because I've been so focused on the routines and the rules and what's right, and I've actually forgot about that this is about love. Or, love has leaked out of my life right now, maybe even in this season or in my school or the way I'm relating to my peers or my family or the people around me. I need to learn to love again. You can confess and just ask him, the one who broke his life and gave it away for you, to give you that kind of heart and love for others.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Oh, you're worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder.
Friends, I think it's so appropriate that today is a day that we get to celebrate communion together, because it's a beautiful way to actually receive the teaching that we have heard today. It is something that reminds us that Jesus didn't just speak these words. This isn't just something he taught us, but he actually demonstrated it for us. Just as VJ said earlier, that greater love has no one than this, that someone might lay down their life for their friends. That's exactly what Jesus has done for us, right? Elsewhere, one of the biblical writers said, this is actually how God demonstrates his love for us, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That's the beautiful gift that we celebrate at communion, friends. Not only does it remind us and tell us that, you know, in the 1,000,001 ways that every single one of us fails and falls short in living lives of love, the gift of communion reminds us that we are forgiven people, that the God of love has actually overcome all of the shortcomings of our own love by demonstrating his love for us and dying for us. And so we can receive that. We can receive forgiveness and a renewed sense of the life of Jesus to live a whole new way. And that's the other incredible gift that communion does. It says we not only receive his healing and forgiveness and cleansing, we actually receive him. We receive his very presence into our lives to say, oh, may the love of God actually be demonstrated in similar ways through my life as I receive more and more of Jesus, not just through this act, but through a life of faith day by day in him and in the incredible ways he came to bring into the world. And so, friends, let's take part in this communion celebration today, knowing that we are both forgiven, but also renewed by his incredible love for us. And so we remember, right, that on the night before Jesus died, he was with his friends. He was sharing a meal. He took bread. He gave thanks for it. He broke it. And he said, this is my body, which is given for you. May his life be given to us, and might we receive it with faith to actually live out the life that he is pouring into us. So we can take part right now. And then he took the cup with his friends and he said, this cup, friends, is now not just a glass of juice or a glass of wine, but it is my blood, which is going to be poured out for the forgiveness of sins. And so we can take this cup being reminded that we are people, you know, not just sinners, but forgiven sinners, people who are cleansed and healed and made new because of the love of Christ. And so this is what communion is meant to do for us, right, friends? Every time we take part in this, as we share in the bread, reminding us of the broken body of Christ, and in the cup, reminding us of the spilled blood of Christ, that we are saying this and reminding ourselves, and actually the world around us, that we are people who live as forgiven people because of the love of Christ. We are actually people who live as holy, renewed people because of the love of Christ, to live out that same love in the world around us by his grace and through his presence in the Holy Spirit. And so would you pray with me even now? Lord Jesus, I thank you that this is a reality that we live in. And that even as you call us to live out lives of self-giving, self-sacrificing love for the sake of the people around us, for the sake of the world, you don't do it with a heavy-handedness saying, look at all the ways that you have failed and fallen short. And you certainly don't do it with a laissez-faire, like, oh, you know, things aren't going to work out and so that's just how life goes. No, you do it through the ongoing, never stopping power of your forgiveness for all of the ways that we fail and fall short to love well. But even more, you do it through the ongoing pouring out of your very presence into our lives. Through your Holy Spirit, which you promised us, your Spirit lives in us to actually live out lives that somehow miraculously, incredibly resemble yours. And so Jesus, would you just continue to do just that, to pour out your forgiveness and your power and your love into our lives, that our lives might be renewed and that we might be people who in all of our relationships, in all of our work, in all of the places that we go and the things that we do, we might be people who demonstrate the kind of love that you so freely give to us. So we thank you, Lord Jesus. We pray in your name. Amen.
Your grace is enough, more than I need. At your word I will believe, and I wait for you. Draw near again. Let your spirit make me new, and I will fall at your feet. And I will fall at your feet, and I will worship you here. Your presence in me, your presence in me, Jesus, light my way. By the power of your word, yes, I am restored, yes, I am redeemed. Thank you, Lord. By your spirit I am free, and I will fall at your feet, and I will fall at your feet, and I will worship you here. Freely you gave it all for us, surrendered your life upon that cross. Great is the love that's poured out for all. This is our God, lifted on high, lifted on high, from death to life. Forever our God is glorified, servant and king, you rescue the world. This is our God. I will fall at your feet, and I will worship you here.
Hey, as we wrap up today's service, just want to let you know about a couple quick announcements before we let you go. First off, we've been letting you know the last 2 or 3 weeks about our annual survey, which we've got on the go right now. And many of you have already responded to that, so thank you so much. But if you haven't, this is kind of our last call that we want to put out to you. This is just something that we do once a year around this time of year, just to kind of get a sense of where each of you are coming from, how each person is kind of engaging and connecting and making use of the resources that we're offering as a church, and just to give us as leaders a little bit more of a sense of how we can best serve you and our broader community together. And so it's really important information. We just appreciate each one of you who takes the few minutes to fill out the survey. And even as a little bit of an added incentive, we want to offer you a $5 gift card to everyone who fills it out, and even put your name in a draw to give out a $500 Amazon gift card. We just really value the information and the way that we can use it to actually be a greater blessing, not only to our church community, but to our broader community as well. And so if you haven't filled out that survey yet, information on our weekly email is, in terms of how to get to the link for it, is there. If you're not getting our weekly email, we'd love for you to get connected into our mailing list, and even to hear a little bit more about you. So you can do that by going onto our website, thewell.ca/new here. You can write in the note, I'd love to get the emails, and we'd love to send them to you. But this is the last call, like I said, for our annual survey. We'd love for you to fill it out if you haven't already. And thanks to all of you that have. Last thing I want to let you know about is our upcoming annual family meeting, which is happening on Sunday, May 30th at 6:30 p.m. Again, details for that and for the Zoom link, it's going to be happening online over Zoom. That link will be coming up in our weekly emails as well. But our annual family meeting is just, as many of you are familiar with, it's a chance for all of us to come together, to gather, to hear about some of the joys and the struggles over the last year. Because this, particularly with this year, it has certainly had both, hasn't it? But for us to take some time to remember and even rehearse God's goodness and the ways that He has been at work in our community and in our midst over the last year, and then also to look ahead to some of the things that we have on our radar for the year ahead. And so if you are like a formal member of our church community here at The Well on any one of our sites, this is something that's kind of an obligation, like we require and certainly ask and expect in love that every one of us as members is going to be there. But if you're not a formal member, man, the invitation is there. We want everyone who considers The Well to be home, or even if you're just checking us out and kind of saying, oh, well, like what goes on a little bit behind the scenes or behind the curtain? How can I get a little bit more involved and find out what's going on in this community? The invitation is wide open. We'd love for you to come and join us on our annual meeting. So like I said, it's Sunday, May 30, 6:30 p.m. on Zoom. More information and the Zoom link will be sent out over our email. Thank you so much, friends, for joining us today. I hope that you go on in the rest of this day and in the rest of this week just a little bit more attentive to the love of God for you and to the love of Jesus working through you. God bless you.